Thank you for that question, Dick. I will first say that from many of you, you know that this is an issue I've been working on since before I came to serve in the legislature, and it's often characterized as an urban versus rural conversation. But what I do know is that the epidemic of gun violence is in every corner of our state. If you look at the statistics, gun deaths in Oregon are driven by suicide and domestic violence. And that is not an urban versus a rural conversation. So we have to start really, we have to look at that conversation and the legislation that we're considering in a way where it's data driven, and that we're getting at the causes of gun violence, injury, and death. And what you will see, which is very different from the first year I came to serve in this legislature, is there are a lot of legislators who are actively involved in the gun violence prevention conversation and who have introduced bills. Some of these bills are their own. Others were dropped or drafted for constituents. There are several that were drafted at the request of students. So you will see, I think, a broader conversation than we've seen in the past. We've done good work, whether it's universal background checks or the extreme risk protection orders, in getting at the causes of gun violence. What you'll see this session is bills on safe storage, child access bills, a conversation around the age of purchasers. We have some major retailers who want us to take up the issue about whether or not they can deny sales to folks under 21. Closing the loophole around domestic violence. We worked on that last session. We passed good legislation on that last session, but there's continued work to do on access to guns if you have a restraining order against you in a domestic violence situation. So you'll see that. You'll see bills on equipment restrictions. So whether it's types of firearms or high-capacity magazines or the ability to buy ammunition, there'll be concepts on that as well. It's my hope that we can come to some common consensus about what those individual proposals look like, because there are many of them, and get our arms around a conversation that tackles a handful of those issues that really impact Oregonians. But I think that the conversation that is getting the most attention now with at least my members is child access and safe storage.
Thanks for the question. I think at the heart of everything is probably a fundamental dispute about the Second Amendment between parties here. I don't want to overstate that it is not an urban versus rural thing, but all I know is rural Oregon is steeped in the gun culture. We teach our children to use guns safely from the very earliest days, and that's the way we live. I come from a time that may be very remote to some of you, but at Grants Pass High School, 1967 through 1970, you would see a number of the pickup trucks in the student parking lot with deer rifles in the cab, and the kids were waiting to get out of school and go deer hunting before they had to go home. And so they wanted to go hunting directly from school. So that shows you what a different world and a different time it is. We are generally adamantly against anything that will infringe our rights to own and use our guns. Ammunition, the same thing. We think it's a direct infringement of the Second Amendment to have to go get a permit to go buy a gun. To have magazines that only contain 5 is very impractical. That doesn't work. And to be restricted in how much ammunition you can buy, laughable in rural Oregon. With people going to the gun range at the frequency that they do, they can burn through 100, 200, 300 rounds in one afternoon of sighting in various rifles. So it's just a difference in the way we look, first of all, at the Second Amendment. I think a number of us feel that, and I would never impugn my friends here, I care for them too much, but we believe that in an overarching sense, there are people who want to disarm us over time. And incrementally, they're happy to do that. And we see those increments, and we say, by and large, no to those increments. I feel that the idea is to go after the low-hanging fruit first, and then gradually move up the tree as you go. Because there are some people that are just, and many people, who are adamantly against firearms. And so as a result, that's why you will find a lot of resistance coming out of rural Oregon. Because for us, guns are a way of life. And again, we teach our children how to use them safely from day one. And we get really concerned when we see things like that. These are emotional issues for our people. I hate to get our people spun up. You know, I hate for our gun owners, there will be a certain number of them that get spun up incredibly over things like this. And I know on the anti-side, they get spun up as well when they get an opportunity to restrict our use, our constitutional use of our guns. We get really concerned about laws that make us criminals. I mean, a world where I could get my weapons stolen and I wind up paying a fine for that and going to jail, perhaps, if I don't report it stolen quickly enough. Wow, that's not our way of life. We can't relate to that, and that's a concern to us.